Welcome to the Midnight Ledger, Bite Size. 6 short original horror stories told by firelight, part of the Campfire Tales collection from
The Witness Ledger.
Tonight, we have 6 stories drawn from the shadows of the roads we drive alone. Come closer. The fire's warm, and the night is waiting. Story 1. The Passenger. There are decisions you make in a fraction of a second that you spend the rest of your life unpacking. The ones that hinge on something as small as a gap in the rain, or a particular angle of headlights, or the fact that you'd just been thinking about your mother and the thought had made you feel generous towards strangers in a way you weren't always. I stopped because she was soaked through and the road was empty, and it was 11:30 on a Tuesday in October, and whatever risk there is in stopping for someone on a dark road at night, I calculated without thinking and decided was worth it. She was young, early 20s I thought, dark hair plastered flat by the rain, a light jacket that was doing nothing for her. She got in without speaking and sat with her hands in her lap and looked straight ahead. I asked where she was going. She gave me a village name. I knew it. 8 miles up the road. I'd passed through it 100 times. I said, of course, no trouble, and pulled back onto the road. She didn't speak again for several minutes. I didn't push it. Some people aren't talkers, and she'd had a rough night clearly, and the silence was fine. The rain was loud on the roof. The wipers kept time. After a while, she said, I used to know this road really well. I said something like, "You're from around here then?" She said, I was, a long time ago. Something in the way she said it made me not ask anything else. Not sadness exactly. Something older than sadness, more settled. I watched the road, and she watched the road, and we drove. About 3 miles from the village, she said, "You can let me out here." There was nothing there. A field gate on the left, a hedge on the right, the road stretching ahead into the dark. I said, "I'm happy to take you into the village. It's no bother." She said, "This is fine. Thank you for stopping." I pulled over. She opened the door and got out, and I watched in the mirror as she walked toward the field gate. I waited until she reached it. I don't know why. Some instinct toward making sure she was all right. And then I pulled away. I glanced in the mirror one more time before the road curved. She was gone. Not through the gate. There hadn't been time. Not back into the road. Just gone, the way something goes when it was never entirely there to begin with. I drove the rest of the way with the heater on full and both hands on the wheel, and the particular feeling of someone who has just understood something they don't have words for yet. When I got home, I sat in the car for a while before going in. In the morning, curious in the way you get when something won't leave you alone, I looked up the village, its history, its records, the kind of idle searching you do when you're trying to find the shape of something. There had been an accident on that road, years ago, decades ago. A young woman, walking home from the village in the dark, a car that hadn't seen her in time. The accident had happened at a field gate 3 miles from the village. I haven't driven that road since, not because I'm afraid. I'm not exactly. But because some roads, I think, belong to more than the living. And I'm not sure I was meant to see what I saw. I'm not sure she meant to be seen. Story 2. The Wyatt Road. If you've ever driven across Nevada, you know the particular quality of that emptiness. It isn't the emptiness of a place that used to have something in it. It's older than that. A landscape that never had much interest in being inhabited, that tolerates roads and signs and the occasional gas station the way a large animal tolerates a fly you're passing through. The desert is not. I was driving from Reno to Las Vegas, a trip I'd made before, not a trip I was nervous about. 10 hours on roads I knew, a playlist I'd had for years, a cooler on the back seat with water and bad sandwiches. I'd left at 9 in the evening to avoid the heat and to have the roads to myself. I had the roads to myself. At around midnight, somewhere in the long flat stretch south of Tonopah, I took a turn. I want to be careful about how I say this, because the honest version of it sounds like I wasn't paying attention, and I was paying attention. I am a careful driver, and I know that road, and I did not intend to turn. But there was a junction I had no memory of, and I took it. And it was several miles before something told me. Not a sign, not a change in the road surface, just something. That I had left the highway. The road was unmarked. 2 lanes, well surfaced, running straight as a line into the dark. No signs, no mile markers, no lights on the horizon in any direction. I slowed down and looked for a place to turn around. There was nowhere, just desert on both sides, the scrub pale in the headlights, the road continuing with the absolute indifference of a road that doesn't care whether you drive it or not. I drove for 45 minutes. I know it was 45 minutes because I watched the clock, the way you do when you're trying to stay calm, and time is the only thing you have to hold on to. The other car appeared after about 20 minutes, behind me. Headlights, distant, keeping pace. I sped up. It sped up. I slowed. It slowed. Not aggressive, not closing in, just maintaining the same distance with the same patient consistency, as if we were connected by something invisible. I tried to think about it practically. Another driver, also lost, also following the road south, relieved perhaps to see taillights ahead. That was the sensible explanation, and I repeated it to myself several times. At the 45-minute mark, the road simply rejoined the highway. No junction, no merge. The unmarked road became the highway, as if it had always been the highway, as if the last 45 minutes had been a seam in something, and I had passed through it and come out the other side. I pulled onto the shoulder and stopped. I watched my mirrors, the car behind me, the headlights that had followed me for 25 minutes across an unmarked road in the Nevada desert did not appear. I waited 10 minutes. Nothing came. I drove the rest of the way to Las Vegas with every light in the car on. I have looked for that junction many times since, on maps and satellite images, and the long, patient, obsessive searching of someone who needs to know. There is no junction there. There is no road. I drove it for 45 minutes. Something drove it with me. Neither of us should have been there. Story 3. Radio silence. I need to start with what I know, because what I know is already strange enough. And I want you to understand that before I get to the part that I can't explain, I was driving through the highlands in November, a solo trip. I do this occasionally, rent a small cottage for a week, walk, read, cook badly, return to my life with enough quiet in me to last a few months. The road I was on was single track, 50 miles from the nearest town of any size, and it was past 10 in the evening, and the dark was the kind of dark you only get that far from anywhere. My phone had lost signal an hour earlier. The radio had been cycling through static for most of the drive. 1 or 2 stations bleeding in and out, nothing holding. I had turned the volume down and driven in silence. At some point past 10, the radio found something. Not static, a station. Clear and strong, the kind of signal that sounds like the transmitter is 5 miles away, rather than nowhere. Music first. I want to be careful about describing it, but it was old. The sound quality of something recorded before I was born. The particular warmth of analog recording. Then a voice, a presenter, easy and familiar the way late-night radio used to be, the way it isn't anymore. I turned the volume up. He was doing dedications. If you are old enough to remember that format, you'll know it. People writing in or calling in, asking for a song for someone. The presenter would read the dedication and play the request, and it was the most ordinary thing in the world. And in the context of a dark road in the Scottish Highlands at 10 o'clock at night, it was the most comforting thing I had ever heard. I listened for about 20 minutes. 3 or 4 songs, 2 or 3 dedications. I didn't recognize any of the songs, but they were good, slow, melodic, the kind of music that suits a dark road. And then the presenter said, "And this next one goes out to anyone driving through the glen tonight. You know who you are. Safe travels. I am the only person who could have been driving through that glen at that hour. I know this the way you know things about remote roads at night, with the certainty of someone who has seen no other headlights for an hour. The song that played was one I knew, an old one that had been my father's favorite, one I hadn't heard since his funeral 6 years ago. I pulled over. I sat on the side of a single track road in the Scottish Highlands, and I listened to the whole thing. When it ended, the signal dropped, instantly, completely, back to static, as if the station had only ever existed for that one song. I looked up the frequency when I had signal again. The station had gone off the air in 1987. The transmitter had been decommissioned. There was no legal or technical explanation for what I'd picked up. I have tried to find a rational account of it. Atmospheric ducting, which can carry radio signals extraordinary distances under certain conditions. An unlicensed broadcaster. Equipment malfunction producing phantom signals from old recorded material. I've tried all of those. None of them account for the dedication. None of them account for the song. I drove the rest of the way to the cottage in silence. I didn't touch the radio again that trip. But I'll be honest with you. Sitting here now, thinking about it, the dark road, the warm signal, the voice that knew I was there, I'm not sure I want an explanation. Some things feel like gifts, even the ones that shouldn't be possible. Story 4. The figure at mile marker 9. The road runs north to south through flat farmland, the kind of landscape that makes no concessions to drama, just fields and sky and the occasional cluster of trees that marks where a farmhouse sits back from the road. I drove it every night for 8 months, night shift at a distribution center, 40 minutes each way, a road so familiar I could have driven it without thinking. I was driving it without thinking the first time I saw it. Mile marker 9 is roughly halfway along. A green post on the shoulder, nothing distinctive about it. Just a number on a road full of numbers. I passed it every night without registering it. On a Thursday in January, I registered it. There was a figure standing next to it. I had perhaps 2 seconds as my headlight swept past, enough to register the shape of a person standing still on the shoulder, facing the road, tall, dark clothing, standing with a stillness that wasn't the stillness of someone who has just stopped walking, but the stillness of something that has been standing there for a long time. I watched the mirror. The figure didn't move. I told myself, someone's car had broken down. Someone was walking home. Someone was doing something at that hour on that road that had an ordinary explanation I hadn't thought of yet. I saw it again the following Tuesday. Same place, same figure, same absolute stillness. I was going more slowly this time. I'd been thinking about it all week, I'll admit, and I'd unconsciously reduced my speed as I approached that stretch. I had longer to look. The figure was facing away from me this time, standing at the marker, facing into the field on the other side of the road, looking at whatever was out there in the dark. I drove past. I watched the mirror for the whole length of the straight. The figure did not turn around. I started varying my route, adding 20 minutes to my drive to avoid that road, telling myself it was nothing, that I was being irrational, that there was an explanation, and simultaneously being absolutely unwilling to drive past mile marker 9 again. I managed 3 weeks before the alternative route added up, and the extra petrol added up, and the pure illogic of it got to me. I took the original road. It was a Tuesday again, February, the worst of winter, the fields white on both sides. I came up on mile marker 9 doing 50, my eyes on the road, telling myself there would be nothing there. There was something there. Same figure, same place, but this time, and this is the part that I have not been able to process, that I have turned over and over in my mind for 2 years. This time it was facing me, not the road, not the field, me, as if it had known which night I'd come back, as if it had been waiting. I did not stop. I drove without looking in the mirror until I was certain I was past it, and then I looked, and the shoulder was empty. I found a new job 4 months later. A different shift, a different route. I have not driven that road since. I looked it up once, from a distance. County records, local history, anything that might explain a figure at a mile marker on a flat Ohio road in the middle of winter. I found an accident report. Old, 1971. A man walking the road at night struck by a vehicle that didn't stop. The accident happened at mile marker 9. I closed the tab. I haven't looked again. Story 5. The Diversion. I want to say first that I am a practical person. I am an engineer by training and temperament. Someone who defaults to systems and evidence. Someone who has spent 30 years troubleshooting the physical world and has a low tolerance for vagueness. I tell you this not to preempt your skepticism, but to explain why what happened to me on the M6 in November affected me as much as it did, because practical people don't have experience like this. Or so I thought. I was driving back from a client site, late, tired, the motorway quiet in the way it gets after midnight when the lorries thin out and the lanes open up. I'd done the drive a dozen times. I was perhaps 40 minutes from home. The diversion signs appeared around junction 14. Roadworks, presumably. I hadn't heard anything about it, but closures happen without much warning sometimes. The signs were standard, yellow, reflective, the little arrow indicating I should take the exit. I followed them. Off the motorway, onto a B road, following the signed route. This is the part of a diversion where you simply trust the signs and wait for the road to bring you back to where you are going, and mostly they do. These signs did not bring me back. I followed them for, I want to be precise, 38 minutes. Through villages I didn't recognize, along roads that my sat-nav seemed to be struggling with, through a stretch of what I can only describe as deep countryside that I could not account for at all given where I thought I was. The Midlands are not wilderness. There is nowhere in the English Midlands where you should be on a road with no signage, no houses, no lights on the horizon. And yet, the signs kept coming. Yellow, reflective, authoritative. I followed them because what else do you do? At the 38-minute mark, I came through a small village, a real one. A pub, a church, a handful of houses, a village that existed. I pulled over outside the pub and got out, partly to clear my head, and partly because something about the last half hour had shaken me more than I wanted to admit. There was a man locking up the pub. I asked him the name of the village. He told me. I asked him which way to the motorway. He looked at me for a moment. Then he said, which one? I said, the M6. He said, that's about 60 miles north of here, mate. I had been on the motorway 40 minutes ago. I had followed a diversion that had taken me 60 miles in the wrong direction, along roads I could not account for and could not find later on any map I checked. I drove home via roads I knew. It took 2 hours. In the morning, I reported the diversion to the Highways Authority. They had no record of any closure on that stretch of the M6 that night. They had no record of any diversion signs. I have driven that section of motorway many times since. The junction is exactly where it should be. The roads around it are exactly where they should be. I have never found the village I stopped in. I have the name he gave me. I have searched for it repeatedly. It doesn't exist. I am an engineer. I deal in what can be measured and verified and reproduced. I have no framework for this. I have only the name of a village that isn't there, and the memory of a road that went somewhere it shouldn't have been able to go. And the quiet, persistent knowledge that whatever was on those signs was not put there by the Highways Authority, and that it wanted me somewhere specific, and that whatever it wanted with me, I was apparently allowed to leave. Story 6. The last rest stop. Let me tell you about the kind of tired that makes you do things you wouldn't otherwise do. Not sleepy tired. That's manageable. That's windows down and cold air and a strong coffee at the next stop. I mean the deep tired that comes after a long grief, after months of not sleeping properly, after the kind of year that takes something out of you that you're not sure you'll get back. The tired that sits behind your eyes and makes the world feel slightly distant, slightly translated, as if you're watching your own life through glass. I had that kind of tired. I was driving from Albuquerque to Amarillo, a drive I'd done before, a straightforward run east on the 40, flat desert on both sides and the stars enormous overhead, and nothing much to think about except the road. I'd left late. I had reasons for leaving late that I won't go into. but they were the kind of reasons that belonged to a year, like the one I'd had. At around 3 in the morning, I needed to stop. The rest stop appeared on the right, a low building, a few lights, a parking area with one other car in it. Nothing unusual. I pulled in. Inside was exactly what a rest stop should be. A counter, a woman behind it, the smell of old coffee, and the particular stillness of a place that exists for people passing through. I asked for coffee. She poured it without being asked and set it on the counter and looked at me. She said, "Long night, Daniel." I want to be very clear here. I had not told her my name. There was no card transaction, no loyalty app, nothing that would have given her my name. She said it the way you say the name of someone you know, easily, without weight, as if it would be strange not to. I said, "I'm sorry?" She said, "You should sleep before Amarillo. Pull off at Tucumcari. There's a motel on the east side of town. Tell them Carol sent you." I stood at the counter and tried to find something to say. She smiled, not unkindly, the smile of someone who is used to people being confused. She said, "Your mother used to stop here, on the long drives. She always had the coffee. My mother had died 14 months before this. She had driven this road many times. She'd lived in Amarillo for 20 years. I knew this. I had not told this woman any of it. I paid for the coffee. I don't remember doing it. I remember being back in the car, in the parking lot, with the cup in my hand. I pulled off at Tucumcari. I found the motel on the east side of town. I slept for 6 hours. The first real sleep I'd had in months. I didn't mention Carol's name. I didn't need to. In the morning, I drove back to the rest stop. The building was there. The parking area was there. But the windows were dark and the door was locked, and there was a notice on the glass, weathered and curled at the edges, the kind of notice that has been there for years. Closed. And a date. 11 years ago. I stood in the parking lot of a closed rest stop in the New Mexico desert, and I drank the last of the coffee, still warm somehow in the cup, and I thought about my mother, about the long drives she'd made on this road, about the stops she'd taken, about the woman who knew my name. I don't know what I encountered that night. I have no framework for it that doesn't require me to let go of things I was trained to hold on to. But I slept. For the first time in 14 months, I slept. And when I got to Amarillo, I sat in the driveway of my mother's house. My house now, I supposed. And I said thank you, out loud, to nobody in particular. Or perhaps to somebody. Perhaps she was listening. And that brings us to the end of tonight's tales. Thank you for listening to the Midnight Ledger, Bite Size. Don't forget, the road doesn't always tell the truth. Good night. Sleep tight. Mind the nightmares don't bite.